Tennis star Novak Djokovic won his fourth straight title at Wimbledon over the weekend, but said he has no plans to get vaccinated in order to bypass restrictions to enter the United States for the U.S. Open in August. Let's watch.
Novak Frank from L'Equipe. Which good news are you waiting exactly from U.S. Open? Exemption or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not vaccinated and I'm not planning to get vaccinated, so the only good news I can have is them removing the mandated green vaccine card or whatever you call it to enter United States, or exemption. I don't know. I don't think exemption is realistically possible, or if that is possibility, I don't know what exemption would be about. So I don't know. I don't have much chances there. I think it's just whether or not they remove this in time for me to get to USA.
Right.
Oh my God, it's so stupid.
So look, the exemption would be.
No, it's stupid to require him to get vaccinated in order to participate in this. It's so stupid.
Well, right. In order to enter the country, if you're not a citizen of the United States,
Right.
you have to be vaccinated still in order to get in.
Right. Well, those policies have no real basis in, the rationale that you need originally, right, was, well, we want people to be vaccinated so that they're less likely to spread the disease because we're trying to manage to keep the disease under control. But the disease is not like coming into this country from like it's already here. Right. B, the idea that the vaccine or vaccinated people have some significant reduction in likelihood of transmitting is also no longer true, if it was ever true. So it's really just for the vaccinated person's health that you'd want them to be vaccinated, or for the person who gets the vaccine. And if he, determines in his judgment or, consultation with his doctor that he doesn't want to get vaccinated, he's a very, very physically fit, in good shape person. He's not in any high risk category. It should be his choice anyway, but it's just, there's clearly no public health rationale in having this requirement.
Yeah, in some ways the exemptions kind of prove the point that you're making. So the fact that the exemption that he's referencing allows the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Transportation, or Homeland Security to basically waive this requirement for reasons. The fact that there are a list of countries where if you're coming from those countries, the scarcity of vaccines in those places means that they waive it for you as well, just because it's almost impossible to get a vaccine in Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, Zambia, Yemen, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that there's this long list of places where this doesn't apply, really suggests that it's not a public health issue that's at issue here. And whereas in a segment from a couple of weeks ago, Kim, we were going back and forth about the vaccines that should be required of Coast Guard
military
workers,
or national
National Guard. The National Guard. And I was making the point that there are a lot of things that are required of the National Guard. In this case, the COVID vaccine really does stand out. It's not like there's a whole host of vaccines people have to get to come to the United States, which you could argue might be medically indicated in certain instances. No, like this seems to be an outlier despite all of the things that exist in the world that could potentially be brought to the country.
And if it was about public health, then it shouldn't matter that this vaccine is not widely available in the countries that you mentioned, right? If it was we have to prevent people who are unvaccinated from entering the country because there's some public health risk, then it wouldn't matter. The reason if they don't have access to vaccines, well, tough, too bad, that's not great, but then they can't come here. So the fact that we do allow those people to come here just shows you that it is not for a actual public health reason.
Yeah, or at very least that there's a balancing test that says, okay, maybe you're a refugee coming from a war-torn place, and we're going to say your safety and getting out of there is more important than the potential risk of bringing the vaccine to the United States. But even that cost-benefit risk assessment suggests that the risk of any given person coming to the United States and bringing COVID isn't that significant.
Right. And also, with Novak, the reason why he was even able to play at Wimbledon is because Europe no longer has the vaccine requirements to get into Europe. So if you're an unvaccinated American, you can travel to Europe. But if you're an unvaccinated European, you cannot travel to the United States. So it is, and quite frankly, the only real explanation for that, because the rest of the world is no longer really requiring vaccines for entry, is Big Pharma has bought off a lot of our politicians, and so they continue to make decisions that benefit their corporate donors. But Novak Djokovic is, for what right now holds the second most Grand Slam titles behind Nadal. So Rafael Nadal has 22 Grand Slam titles. Novak Djokovic has 21. The U.S. Open is not, so I follow tennis like a nerd, but the U.S. Open is not typically one of the big, each player kind of has their home court, if you will, like their home Grand Slam. For Novak, it is the Australian Open, and that is where he was banned from playing because he was not vaccinated. Now, the French Open, it's a clay court. He doesn't do as well there. That one, Rafael Nadal won, and he does really well on the grass court of Wimbledon. U.S. Open, even though it's a hard court like the Australian Open, he still doesn't typically it's not, I mean, he's won definitely some Grand Slam titles at the U.S. Open, and he's usually in the finals or semifinals. But so maybe on this one, he can kind of say, all right, I guess if you don't want me to play, it's not as much of a jab at him as not being able to play at the Australian Open. That was a huge ding to him. He wins that all the time. I mean, he's won that one like nine times, something ridiculous. So, but the whole thing, I mean, to ban arguably the greatest tennis player who's ever lived by stats, Novak Djokovic beats out even Federer and Nadal. He has the best overall stats. So to ban the best tennis player to, not only now to live now, but maybe to have ever lived why are we doing this? And, with Wimbledon, they banned the Russian and Belarusian players. You could go if you were unvaccinated to Wimbledon, but you couldn't go if you were Russian or Belarusian. But in this particular instance with the science, if we're not going to talk about the politics of it, but just the science of it, to ban unvaccinated players from coming in it never made sense. It makes even less sense now. And so it's a big shame. And it makes, if you're another tennis player, do you really want to play in that Open when you know that you're not going to be able to ever compete against the greatest? I mean, that would be my question.
I always forget what a tennis expert you are until we start talking about this, Kim.
I know, right? And then I nerd out because I'm all about. And really, they also banned some of the better. Wimbledon. It was a big scandal with Wimbledon because not allowing some of the Belarusian and the Russian players. They did eliminate a lot of the top 5 players were not able to play. Russians pump out tennis players, and a lot of those tennis players, a lot of American tennis players, a lot of tennis players from different European countries are actually Russian. They switch their nationality at some point in the game because they get offered money to come and train and support that country. The woman that actually won, the female tennis player that won Wimbledon on the singles women's side, actually is a Russian, but she had recently changed her nationality to like Kazakhstan. I'm not sure which. It was one of the stands, and she changed it because they offered her a bunch of money, to support their country instead, even though she's never lived there and she's not from there. She grew up in Moscow, but she won even though Russians were banned from playing. But, the whole thing's a disaster. Anyway, sorry, I nerded out. But the whole Novak should no, and then they call him Novax Djokovic.
Oh.
That's his.
I mean,
that's his
the point
nickname.
really is that these travel restrictions just don't make sense. I mean, it's not just he should get an exemption because, I mean, that would be kind of unfair. We're just going to give an exemption, but everyone should get this exemption because it should not be there's no rational public health basis for it if there ever was. Europe doesn't do it anymore. We don't need to stand alone. It's funny the way, and actually I guess I do disagree with you potentially, Kim. You said you attribute it to the influence of Big Pharma. I'm not really sure that's what it is in the maintenance of these restrictions. It feels like it's just the identity of Team Blue, Team Democrat to keep these things in place, and that's just like part of their personality, and they're the people who staff these agencies and are running the government right now, and like that's just what their side does. So I don't know that it's the influence. Obviously, the influence of Big Pharma makes policies happen because of it. I'm not saying that that never happens, but the maintenance of things like this seems to me to be more, or maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just like bureaucratic. Like things don't go away after they're proposed. Policies that get introduced, it's really hard to unintroduce them. That's been true of not like post 9/11 style travel restrictions, right? A lot of them, they've all stayed in place. In fact, they've gotten more obnoxious over time, even with no new rationale for doing that. So that's why I don't. It's harder to explain why that is, but it doesn't even need to be anything as nefarious as they're being paid off to do it by vaccine manufacturers, because this seems to just happen in general.
Giant donor. Pfizer's a giant donor of the Democratic Party. They sponsored a lot of this stuff, and and throw them parties, and it's definitely a big problem. So whether or not they're influenced by it because of identity or because of big pharma money, either way, big pharma is definitely in the pocket. Democrats are definitely in the pocket of big pharma, but yeah. Right. We definitely can't say for sure why they're doing what it is they're doing.
All right. Well, we'll have more Rising right after this.